Welcome to the Apologetics Guy Show, the podcast that helps you find clear answers to tough questions about God, Jesus, and the Bible. I'm Dr. Mikel Del Rosario. I'm your apologetics guy and the host of this brand new podcast, which, by the way, isn't the Apologetics Guy Show. It's my show. It's the Apologetics Guy Show. And so it's a show for women and men, Christians just like you, who are looking for clear answers to tough questions. You know, maybe you've heard a challenge to the Christian faith, and now you're wondering if there's a good answer to it. Maybe you're wrestling with doubts, or maybe you're re-examining some of your early beliefs about God. Or maybe you want to learn how to explain your faith or just have better spiritual conversations with your friends or even your own kids. If that's you, this podcast is for you. Now, many of you know me from the Table podcast at Dallas Theological Seminary. I actually produced the show for 10 years during what I like to call my decade in Dallas. Well, today I'm an associate professor of Bible and theology at Moody Bible Institute in Chicago. And when I accepted the position at Moody, I knew that I'd be wrapping up my time hosting the Table podcast in Dallas. And so I started thinking about how much I wanted to continue sharing with people who listen to me as the host of the Table podcast and connect with more podcast listeners. So I started asking myself, could I start my own show? Well, as a bit of an experiment, I actually did a series of accessible apologetics interviews on my YouTube channel. And I was like, you know what? I could do this. And so today I'm excited to say that I'm officially launching the Apologetics Guy Show, and I'm honored to be a part of the Christianity Today network right from day one. You know, I was a podcaster on the CT network for years hosting the Table, and I'm honored to be a podcaster still on the CT network today. Now, a little bit of what to expect. This is a monthly show. It's going to go live the first Friday of each month. And to be clear, this podcast is not sponsored by Moody and is totally independent from my work at the school. Well, on today's introductory episode, we want to talk about the heart, the vision, and what you can expect from the Apologetics Guy Show. And stay till the end because I'm going to announce my very first guest, and it's probably somebody that you've heard about before who's doing some good work in apologetics. So let's talk about the heart of the show. You know, this is a big year for me because I just earned my PhD at Dallas Theological Seminary. I was studying Jesus as a figure in ancient history. And before that, I earned a Master of Theology also at DTS. And before that, I earned a Master of Arts in Christian Apologetics from Biola University, which is also my alma mater, where I did my undergrad. I've taught college classes in apologetics for over a decade at William Jessup University. Also at Western Seminary, taught a class in evangelism and apologetics. I've also been a youth pastor and a missionary. Now, that might sound like a whole bunch of unnecessary academic and ministry flexing to you, but I share all that because I want you to know the heart behind this show is to take the best lessons from my academic work and my practical ministry experience and put them together in a way that can help you. In a way that can help you with your questions about God, Jesus, and the Bible. See, I want to help you find answers for yourself to those good questions that people have. And there are good answers to these questions. But I also want you to have the courage to share those answers with others as the Lord leads, and to do it in a way that's compassionate, that's courageous and compassionate, in a way that isn't going to make it very odd, very weird with your friends. So now if you're listening to a podcast like this, you probably already know that apologetics isn't about apologizing for what you believe. The word apologetics means a defense. And it comes from 1 Peter 3:15, which says this, "But in your hearts, honor Christ the Lord as holy, always being prepared to make a defense to anyone who asks you for a reason for the hope that is in you, yet do it with gentleness and respect." That's a really important part of the verse, by the way. This was originally written in Greek, and so the Greek word for making a defense is where we get the word apologetics. But you know, apologetics can sometimes get a bad rap. You know, like some people think it's all about arguing and debate and getting into the kind of philosophy that just takes you away from what the Bible teaches. But maybe their first exposure to apologetics, if you've ever met anybody like this, could be that their first exposure was just something that was mean and insensitive and just not at all the kind of apologetics that we're called to as ambassadors of Jesus, people who represent him in the world. And so I like to say that doing apologetics is explaining your faith with courage and compassion. because truth matters. But you know what? Tone matters too. And so before we can do this, we need to get these answers to the tough questions for ourselves before we can share those answers with others. And we need to do some groundwork in building relationships where you have this safe space to explore some of the most important questions in life with your friends. You know, like, is there more to life than this? Does God exist? And my favorite question of all time, who is Jesus? You know, I'm a big fan of studying all things Jesus. So that's the heart behind the show. It's really to help you take all of the experiences that God has given me, the things I've gotten to study over the years, and package it in such a way that it can be helpful to you in the short amount of time that we spend together on this podcast. So that's the heart. Let's take a look at the vision now for what this show can be. You know, when it comes to the Bible, some issues aren't so simple. And, you know, it takes a lot of time, more time than most people have actually, to sort through the details. And so a lot of times when you hear a challenge to the Bible, there's another part of the story that you're actually not getting. And sometimes that's a cultural thing, sometimes it's a historical thing or a contextual thing. But whatever it is, this is the vision. I want to fast track your research into these topics so that you have what you need to know when you're wrestling with doubts or coming alongside somebody else who has tough questions about the Christian faith. And so these episodes are going to help you get oriented to key apologetics topics and give you clarity. It's really important to have clarity, and I want to give you that experience of having clear answers to tough questions where the light goes on and you're like, oh, I get it, right? I get it. That makes total sense. There's tough questions, but there are good answers to the tough questions. So my vision is just to simplify apologetics for you without skimping on the substance. So that's the heart and the vision that I have for the show. Here's what you can expect, because, you know, there are a lot of other apologetics podcasts out there, but this one is going to be a little bit different. It's going to help you get those clear answers to tough questions, but we're going to do it in a way that makes the concepts simple to get and easy to remember. For example, you'll learn some fun illustrations that can help answer questions like, is there any evidence for God based on science? Listen to the story that Dr. Melissa Cain Travis shared with me to explain how the fine-tuning of the universe points us to God.
So the way the analogy goes is that you have this Mr. Jackson who has just made partner at his big firm. And in that event, he's being awarded this big partnership bonus that's a percentage of his past history with the company. And so this big bonus check that he gets on the day of his promotion is $71,369.21. Okay. Because like I said, it's a percentage based on work performance. So he calls his wife. He's so excited, tells her the amount of the check. And she says, honey, since this is a huge financial windfall that we did not expect, I want you to go down to the car dealership and I want you to buy that dream sports car that you've had your eye on for years and years and years. So he's in disbelief and delighted that he gets to go and buy the car of his dreams. So he goes to the dealership and he walks in and they lead him to this car that's on the showroom floor. And it turns out to be exactly the make and model and color that he wanted in his dream car. But it goes beyond that. So he opens the door, he gets inside the car. The seat is adjusted exactly right for his size. And the temperature is set to the exact degrees setting that he likes to keep his home and office. And the playlist playing on the sound system has every single one of his favorite songs. And when the navigation screen lights up, it's already cued with a map that shows the path to get him from the dealership to his home driveway. Right. And then there's a cup holder that's exactly right because he's left-handed. And all of these things about this car are super tailor-made for Mr. Jackson. he says, I will take it. This is amazing. So they go, they write up all the paperwork, and they give him the final total with taxes and fees and everything. And the total comes to $71,369.21. So then the question that you ask about all of these circumstances surrounding his car purchase is, would it be reasonable to think that all of that was by sheer blind chance? And so in the same way, when we look at all of the parameters of our universe that are finely tuned for the existence of life, and further finely tuned for the existence of complex, intelligent life, we're looking at a very similar situation. We ask the question, is it reasonable to conclude that there was no intelligent engineering behind this? And so what I hope I show through the analogy with Mr. Jackson in the sports car is that we would actually be irrational to think that all of that just happened exactly the right way. Right? So just fun stuff.
Yeah, no, that's amazing. I love that. Now, some of the conversations you're going to hear on this podcast come from a short series that I did on YouTube, but most of the time the show will be original content in an interview format. You'll hear interviews with authors that specialize in simplifying apologetics for you and making these spiritual conversations that we have in everyday life as you're just going about your day, you're dropping your kids off at soccer, you're meeting friends for coffee, how we can make these spiritual conversations better for everyone. We'll talk about communication keys for apologists. And you'll hear topics that come from 3 categories of apologetics. These 3 categories are things that a lot of people don't often think about, but they are as follows. Number 1, philosophical and scientific apologetics. Philosophical and scientific apologetics. Now, that's the most common kind of apologetics topic, like evidence for the existence of God, answering the problem of evil, asking, is there any evidence for God that comes out of the sciences? But a lot of people think apologetics is just that. But there's a whole lot more. Category number 2 is biblical and historical apologetics. Biblical and historical apologetics, answering questions about the historical Jesus, for example, which is my specialty. Again, I'm a big fan of all things Jesus, and that's where I've been living for the past many years, doing my Master of Theology and PhD in the New Testament. It's a fascinating field, and we're going to hear a lot more about those kinds of questions and how to navigate those concerns about the reliability of the Bible and what we can believe and know about Jesus. Okay, the third category is cultural apologetics and cultural engagement. Now, this is where we take things like movies, music, art, film, and all these tough questions surrounding today's hot button issues. This is the place where a lot of our friends actually are today, where they're not asking, is Christianity true or what's the evidence for God, until they know that Christianity, 1, is even good. They don't even care if Christianity is true until they realize Christianity is actually good when it comes to engaging with these hot button issues, and that Christianity is beautiful, that this is actually the best way to flourish because God knows the best way for us to live a flourishing life. And we can see that in movies, in music, these universal longings that we have as human beings. And we can take a look at those things in art and creative things like music. I'm a musician, so I love doing that. But that's not an area that most apologists walk into. So we're going to take a look at all 3 of those areas on this show. Now, maybe you've been to an apologetics conference and you've mostly just heard about one kind of apologetics, maybe the philosophical kind. But again, there is so much more than that, and I'm excited to engage with you on all 3 of these categories of Christian apologetics. Okay, so where can you find the show? Well, again, I'm honored to be part of the Christianity Today network, and you can find this podcast on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, Amazon, Podchaser, wherever you listen to podcasts. Just look for the Apologetics Guy Show, and you should find it in your favorite podcast app. Now, the next episode is coming soon, and it's the first Friday of the month, and so I'm so excited to share it with you. I think you're going to get a lot of value that's going to fast-track your growth in apologetics from this episode. Let me announce what is the first episode and who the guest is going to be. The first episode is all about a creative way to talk about Jesus with people who don't see the Bible as an authority. It'll also help you answer tough questions like, is there any evidence for Jesus outside the Bible? Now, my guest on the show, this very first episode, is J. Warner Wallace. Jim is a cold case homicide detective who left atheism when he became convinced of the truth of Christianity. And like me, he's been totally fascinated by Jesus for quite some time. And so just to give you a little preview, listen to how he answers the question, why does Jesus still matter in a world that rejects the Bible?
So again, it comes back to this thing we just talked about, and I think it's very important. Ask yourself what matters. And then ask yourself, how did we get here in those areas that still matter to me? And you'll probably find that you're steeped in a world that has been so deeply touched by Jesus, the worldview he inaugurated, and the people who followed him and enacted that worldview, that the things you value that you never even knew were indebted to Jesus are indebted to Jesus.
Mm-hmm.
If you're indebted to a certain kind of traditional relationship even, you're probably standing on the Western tradition related to the descriptions of what relationships ought to be in the New Testament. But more importantly, if you have any of those 5 areas, there's actually 6, because I've included also non-Christian theistic worldviews. So if you said, well, spirituality is important to me, well, to tell you what, do you realize that pretty much every theistic worldview hat tips Jesus? They've included Jesus in their worldview in some way. Mm-hmm. Either they're on the pages of their scripture, he's there on the pages, or the leaders of that worldview have now tried to merge Jesus into their worldview. Yeah. If you consider yourself to be just a mildly spiritual person and you identify with some form of Buddhism or Hinduism or whatever it may be, well, guess what? Jesus is already there waiting for you, because he's already been included by the leaders of these groups who see him as part of, at least fitting in to the teaching of their worldview. So if it's not that, if it's science, well, you know what? Scientists, by and large, historically, all the major sciences were founded and fathered by Christ followers. Sorry, it's just true. Most winners historically of all scientific awards, Christians account for more than any other group, all the other groups combined. Even the Nobel Prize. Okay, if you think it's education, well, you realize that modern universities were founded by Christ followers. The first 3 in Bologna, Paris, and Oxford were founded by Christians. I mean, do you realize that the top 15 universities in the world today were all founded by Christians?
Yeah.
That's not a Christian listing. That's the secular listing. Mm-hmm. If you think the arts have not been impacted, but no one's inspired more art than Jesus. No one's inspired more music than Jesus. No one's inspired more literature than Jesus. Whatever area you think it matters to you today, mm-hmm. It turns out you can thank probably the history of Christianity for getting us where we got to be so that you got to have that interest. Yeah. That's why he is history's most important person of interest, because whatever interests you is probably indebted to him.
Mm-hmm. Well, that's awesome. Yeah, I love how Craig Hazen says, why not start your investigation with the religion that has Jesus right in the center, which is Christianity.
That's right.
Now, you don't want to miss this conversation with Jim, so please subscribe to the Apologetics Guy Show, the podcast that helps you find clear answers to tough questions about God, Jesus, and the Bible. Thanks so much for listening to this introductory episode. I'm your Apologetics Guy, Mikel, and until next time, keep the faith.